This is the Making Stitches podcast. This week, the sewers using lockdown to make a community quilt.
People use sewing or needlework or some kind of craft to help them therapeutically through difficult times. And so I thought, this is quite a difficult time for, quite a lot of people. I'll just contact Kathy again, who's the quilter, and say, I've got an idea. And she just went with it. And as a consequence, we've got this creativity and captivity group now who are making 6 or 12-inch squares. And at the end of May, everybody has to hand it in by then. We should have got the beginnings of our quilt.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Making Stitches. I'm Lindsay, and this week we're taking a break from crochet and talking about quilting. Now, something I think I have in common with many makers is the fact I quite like to have a go at lots of different things. Although crochet is probably my true love, I have been known to flirt with sewing, embroidery and even a bit of painting too. So in light of this, Making Stitches will feature non-yarn crafts as well as my favourite. And this week it's the turn of patchwork quilting. I need to lay my cards out on the table here though. Quilting isn't my area. I was taught log cabin patchwork at the age of 11 at school and had a bit of a go at English paper piecing for a hexagon baby quilt once, but that's pretty much where my knowledge ends. Recently, a very good friend of mine told me about a lovely quilt project which is happening because of lockdown. The project was inspired by a very special quilt made by prisoners of war held in Changi in Singapore during World War II. The present-day version is being made by crafters from all over the world who are sending quilt squares to be included. The finished piece will eventually be raffled off to raise funds for a charity which is helping people during this coronavirus lockdown. The person who came up with the idea for this craft in captivity quilt is Sue Brown. I asked her how the project had come about.
My daughter was meant to be getting married this June, and my best friend Kathy, who has known my daughter all her life, very, very generously said she would make her a quilt. And so it's not just any quilt, it's a heritage quilt. So it's got bits of family and friends and, various contacts of my daughter Beth's life. And so my job was to pull all that together, get little examples of things that have gone in the quilt and make a kind of booklet to go with it. And in order to do that and inspire me and, look for some meaningful quotes, I got hold of the book by Claire Hunter called Threads of Life, A History of the World Through the Eye of a Needle. And I came across the amazing chapter about, sewing, needlework, etc., in captivity. And I really hooked onto that particular chapter. It was particularly the bit about women in the Second World War being prisoners of the Japanese in Singapore in a prisoner of war camp. And they were given permission to make a quilt. And for them, it was something about connecting to home, connecting to what they call their menfolk. And luckily, they were given both material and threads, and each one of them had a 6-inch square. They put it all together and they made this quilt, which today hangs in the Red Cross headquarters in London. And it's been an inspiration, I think, to most people. And there's also lots of other examples of, how people use sewing or needlework or some kind of craft to help them therapeutically through difficult times. And so I thought, this is quite a difficult time for, quite a lot of people. I'll just contact Kathy again, who's the quilter, and say, I've got an idea. And she just went with it. And as a consequence, we've got this creativity and captivity group now who are making 6 or 12-inch squares. And at the end of May, everybody has to hand it in by then. We should have got the beginnings of our quilt. So that's it, really.
That sounds like a wonderful idea, a really nice use of all this time that we've got on our hands at the moment.
Absolutely. And it's going in lots of different directions, as you can imagine.
So you said you've got a group of about 30 people taking part. Whereabouts in the world are they?
We've now got 60, actually, which is Quite right. No, I can't believe it either. So we've already got, as you'll see from the email, we've got somebody from the Bahamas. We've got all over England, so Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and England, but different parts of England like Hampshire, Leeds, Durham, all kinds of places, Scotland, Devon, Wales. Well, I'm living in Wales, so that's Monmouthshire, and various other people around me are contributing as well, and someone in Carmarthen. So we're a real kind of, we can call ourselves a global group. I think there's someone coming in from Switzerland, a couple from Northern Ireland. And it's just kind of grown. And when people hear about it, and even if they're not sewers, and I'm certainly not a sewer, people get inspired to kind of just be part of the group and see where it leads them. And what people have done, they've done a little bit of a narrative behind their square to say why they chose, to do it the way they did. And so lots of things have come up from that, from, remembering people who they've lost, to, what they've felt like, the frustrations of being, locked down, to walking in, the beautiful countryside with the fantastic weather we've had, to using this as like a huge summer holiday for their kids, and, lots of water sports and sliding down, waterfalls and so forth. And so there's been a lot of different reasons, a lot of different things that have come out in the quilt. And I think people have so enjoyed just belonging to the group. We've got a Facebook group so people can comment and say they like something and take advice, and people who are a bit nervous can say, I feel a bit daunted by some of these things that look amazing, and they're given reassurance that, the simpler the better, really. Go back to the Changi quilt, and that's very, very simple, with, people just using threads to just put a kiss, on a quilt, which is fine on a square. So, yeah, lots of different things happening.
It's so nice to hear something positive, because, the news is quite grim at times, isn't it, when we turn it on? But to see people making something positive out of this situation, it's really quite uplifting.
It is uplifting, and I can't believe the diversity we're getting in terms of the subject matter that's coming through. Although we've asked, so the quilt hangs together. At some point we've said we need some notion of blue, in your square, but it doesn't have to be all blue. And but the variety of colour and the vibrancy in some of them and the subtleties in others are quite breathtaking. I mean, when I look at them and read, some of the descriptions, it does bring tears to my eyes, actually, both of joy and admiration, as much as anything else, really.
That's so nice. Now, you said about the geographical spread of the people who are taking part. I think there are people of all ages as well.
Yeah, our youngest is a 10-year-old boy, who's quite crafty. He's got a crafty mom, I think, as well, so who can help him along. But he's been dyeing a pillowcase, out of natural dyes, and he's going to be let loose with a bit of supervision, I think, with a sewing machine, and shown how to do some embroidery stitches, and he'll just kind of stitch into that, and he might do something with some colour fast pens on that as well. So I'm waiting to see that one. And the oldest we've got is a woman who's 94, I think, who's living independently, but in kind of accommodation, independent living accommodation. So she's having to stay in, but she can see okay. She can't hear too well, but she can see okay, and she's using a magnifying glass and, being inspired to do something a bit different with the time. There's lots of daytime TV being watched and radio and all the rest of it, but, it's given her a little bit of a focus. And anybody in between. And we've got a couple of men, 3 men, I think, and, so it's coming along.
That's superb. And I guess the ultimate aim is that this is going to be used to raise funds for a charitable cause.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we haven't totally decided on the cause yet. We'll have to have a discussion about that collectively amongst 60 of us and have votes and all those kind of things. But I think we're looking for the outcome to be that we can sponsor or fund an organisation that's found it really, really difficult at this time. And, Women's Refuge comes to mind, Bernardo's comes to mind, all those, organisations that finding it, I guess, difficult to, one, obey those rules, in terms of social distancing, and 2, cope with things that are thrown at them due to the consequence of being confined to home. So, some people aren't as lucky as others in that respect, are they? So,
absolutely. So, you said you've got 60 people involved. I'm assuming you don't want any more, or you'll end up with a humongous quilt.
I think they're coming in dribs and drabs. Someone said, my friend says, I've just talked to my friend about this and I'd really like to be involved. And so we'll take the odd one or two. And, maybe there won't be 60 squares. Maybe somebody says, this is too difficult, or something's come up and I can't do it, or, who knows. But at the moment, I haven't had anybody dropping out. I've just had more additions to the list, really. So we'll see. I mean, it could be 2 quilts, couldn't it? It could be a quilt and a wall hanging. It could be, it could be anything, really. But luckily, we've got this amazing group of very experienced and talented quilters living in Devon. And so all the squares are going to Devon, which is where Catty lives. And they're going to come together and decide on, how things are put together so that it'll look amazing. I mean, it looks amazing now, just thinking about it, just thinking about everything we're getting in. But it takes a huge degree of skill and a good artistic eye, doesn't it, to kind of get it right so that, when it comes together, it does look pretty amazing.
And will there be an opportunity for members of the public to see it when it's finished?
We hope so. We've written to a quilting exhibition that has been postponed and asked them if they'll show it, and I think that's going to be in London. And once it is finished, I think we'll then probably get a little bit more interest in, maybe it'll go on a bit of a tour. I mean, who knows really? Just me in my head going, that would be interesting. The Craftspeople Guild down in Devon. I mean, that's fabulous. There's all kinds of places, aren't there, that we could think about, places in Bath that do regular textile exhibitions. So, one of our people who's contributing is a woman called Anne Jackson, who's actually, what is she? Would she call herself a weaver? She's a tapestry expert. Anyway, she does these small knots and makes these amazing pictures. And she does really big pieces. And so she's got her fingers in lots of pies in terms of where we could possibly go and who we could possibly speak to. So within the group, we've got experts of experts, as it were, in terms of the textile community. So I'm sure it'll go somewhere and, be seen by quite a lot of people. We need an event, when people can come and see the quilt hanging somewhere.
I'm sure that will feel like an amazing sense of achievement once it's all together, especially for the people who've all submitted a square themselves.
Yeah, I'm sure it will.
One of the quilters who's made a square for the quilt is Amanda James. She told me how she got involved after taking part in a previous community quilt with her sewing group.
We had already made a quilt for a refugee family who were coming to Exeter, and it was a lovely experience to be able to all contribute to it. So I think from that is the reason that she sort of approached me to just be part of this. And I looked up about the women who had made the original quilt in Changi Prison, and it just absolutely rang bells with me, and I just thought, what a wonderful thing to be involved in, really. So I was very pleased to be asked.
I guess there's a real sense of community then when you're taking part in a project like this.
Very much so. And I think part of the beauty of this is that it's got expertise in all different areas. Some people are, novice stitchers, and others are obviously very experienced. And I mean, I've just looked at some of the contributions that people have been sending in, and obviously we've got some really talented artists there. But a lot of people are saying this is the first thing they've ever done. But looking at their work, you would never believe that. And I think that people have, really had a great sense of achievement in doing their bits, really, which is kind of what it's all about, really. I always think the journey is as important as the end result, really. That if you enjoy that, that's part of it. And I'm a retired occupational therapist, so I know how important activity is. in people's lives, and occupation in particular, creativity, which is, important to us all, really. Just the simplest of activities bring achievement and joy to us, really.
Especially at a time like this when we're all isolated and can't get to spend time other than virtually with our friends and family.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't compare ourselves to the women who did the original quilt, who were really imprisoned, but it is affecting a lot of people's lives, and you can see that in some of the work that they've put forward. Some people have put examples of, not being able to play with their grandchildren and things like that, which is, very important to people, I think. And, a lot of people are being very creative in their way, and some people are, cleaning out cupboards and tidying and cleaning and doing the garden and things. But for others, that's not what they want to be doing at this time. And to actually have a creative project, I think, is very special, really.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about your particular square that you submitted, Amanda?
Yeah, sure. My square is a tribute to my mother, who died at the end of last year. She was 94 and lived a very busy and creative life. She was very keen on poetry. I mean, she was a quilter and a painter, but she did enjoy poetry. So this is a tribute to her, and the one of her favourite poems, which is A.E. Houseman's A Shropshire Lad, and it's the loveliest of trees, the cherry now. And so my picture is of a little branch with some cherry blossom on it, and just the first lines of the poem. It's a little bit ironic in a way, because the poem actually really describes a white cherry tree, because it talks about snow on the bough and white at Eastertide and things like that. But actually, I've done mine pink because I just like pink. And part of the instructions of this project was that the background should be blue, or it should feature a lot of blue. So I just thought pink looked nice and over the blue, really. So, but that's what it's really about.
Well, that's lovely. So it has a very special meaning to you.
Indeed, it does. It felt right to as I say, my mother was passionate about quilting, and she would have just loved the idea of being involved in a project like that, or the idea of me being involved in a project like that. It would have been right up her street. So it just felt a nice thing to do, really.
If you'd like to see some of the quilt squares which have been created already, including Amanda's lovely one with a pink cherry blossom, there's a selection of photos in the show notes for this episode at makingstitchespodcast.com, as well as on the Making Stitches Instagram page. As soon as I hear about the quilt being finished, I will share with you where you can see it. Thank you so much for listening to Making Stitches. I've been bowled over by the reaction to the podcast so far. It's been listened to around the globe, from Sweden to South Africa and from Hawaii to New Zealand. If you've enjoyed listening to this episode of Making Stitches, please share it with your friends. And if you don't want to miss out on the next episode, please consider subscribing to Making Stitches in your favourite podcast app. You can find it in lots of places, including Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, and rather appropriately, Stitcher as well. It costs nothing to subscribe, it's simply a matter of clicking, and the next episode will appear when it goes online. My name's Lindsay, and this podcast was edited and recorded by me. You can also find me on my blog, Postcard from Gibraltar. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, keep safe and enjoy your crafting.